Just when I thought I knew about all the different kinds of cryptids, a new one pops into my life. This story took place in September of 2020. A couple was preparing to leave a property in Aiken, South Carolina, and saw something unreal. The sighting followed weeks of unexplained movement around the property, but one unsettling feature made the figure unlike anything they could even have imagined. The woman telling the story would like to be referred to as A. So A's fiance, whom she refers to as G for the story, had reconnected with an old friend from high school, and we're going to call that friend B. So she says, we rented and renovated the basement of B's house while searching for a place of our own. It was a separate apartment with its own entrance at the back of the house. The property was not in a neighborhood. It seemed rural to her, with several acres separating the neighboring houses. Woods bordered the backyard. A perfect setting for some creepy cryptids. So B also had two large adult dogs weighing approximately 55 to 65 pounds, which is important for the story later. But A and G's dog was slightly smaller. They often ran and played in the woods at the edge of the backyard. So they became very familiar with the sound of animals their size moving through the undergrowth. She says, everything seemed fine during our first few weeks there, but then we began feeling extremely uneasy whenever we went outside at night. She goes, I know that sounds a little cliche, but it felt as though something was standing in the woods and watching us. And y'all, never underestimate your gut feeling. She said, if we returned home after dark, we would speed walk, almost running from the car at the front of the house, around the side and down to the entrance in the backyard. And then they began to hear it. She said, because the dogs regularly played in the woods, we knew what a 60-pound animal sounded like moving through the trees. So whatever was making these sounds seemed much larger. She goes, it was not simply the three of us frightening one another. The house had a swimming pool, so we received a fair number of visitors. And other people heard the movement as well, and no one wanted to remain outside after sunset. Now, at first they assumed it was a bear. Whatever was moving through the woods sounded enormous, much larger than a person, and a bear was the only explanation that seemed to fit. So a few months passed, and A and G found a place of their own, and they were in the process of moving out when this encounter occurred. So G was near the car arranging boxes so they could make the most of the available space, and A had just carried a box to him and was about to walk back around the side of the house. The yard sloped slightly downhill from the front of the property towards the back. She says, as I walked down the slope toward our basement entrance, I saw it. Now A describes this thing in detail in just a little bit, so hang tight. She goes, it was staring directly at me, straight into my eyes. I am certain it felt like my heart had stopped for several seconds and I completely froze. Some instinct eventually made her begin walking again, and she felt like she could not run though. She tried to behave normally while getting herself inside as quickly as possible. So she shuts the back door, but then immediately unlocks it and then opened it again. She said, I could not leave my fiance outside with that thing. She goes, gruesome images suddenly entered my mind. I imagined G and me beheaded, mangled, and lying on the apartment floor with everything around them smashed. And it just gets crazier. She then had a thought that followed. She thought to herself, no, this is not what it will do. My fear of the unknown is making me unreasonable, and if I let it inside, it will not be like that. And then she experienced the inexplicable urge to invite it in, as though it was like taking over her freaking mind. She said, I wanted to call out to G, but I was afraid that yelling might startle the figure. I also did not want him to rush towards the door and give it an opportunity or the instinct to attack him. Finally, she couldn't stand it any longer and she pulled the door open, intending to run to the car, but G was already right there. He had seen the figure too. He had been watching it watch them. And G said as soon as it turned and disappeared into the woods, that's when he hurried down to the apartment door. This is what they both agreed it looked like. The figure was extraordinarily tall, extremely thin, and a sickly shade of whitish gray. Its eyes appeared brightly illuminated. One particularly confusing detail is that A remembers its eyes as golden, while G insists they were red, and she cannot explain that. She said the worst part of its appearance was that it did not have a mouth. Other than the bright eyes, its face appeared to be tightly stretched, perfectly smooth skin. She said, I had never experienced such a powerful feeling that something was profoundly wrong. I remember wondering how something without a mouth could even eat or remain alive. Very interesting, all of these thoughts that go through your head in moments. A says, sometimes I worry that I had an opportunity to encounter an entirely different species and allowed fear and judgment to ruin it. The figure was unlike me, so I was terrified of it. I still wonder whether I had a genuine reason to be afraid or not. She said, if it had wanted to hurt us, I'm convinced it could have. G said he felt evil radiating from it. He believes that she should stop blaming herself because, in his opinion, it did not have friendly intention. She said, I know the account sounds completely unbelievable. I probably would not believe it if it was someone else telling me the same story. She says, I only want to know whether anyone has seen something similar and might have an explanation for what it was. For months afterwards, she refused to discuss. Whenever G mentioned the encounter, she ended the conversation. She was afraid that somehow it would know that she was thinking of and that it would return and find her again. She said, we no longer live near the property, and I now recognize that that fear is irrational. But you know what? I don't know. That thing had a hold of her mind, I think, which goes far beyond my thoughts of what I initially thought when I hear this, kind of like the appearance of what people say the rake is. Although that not having a mouth thing and the mind stuff, I don't know. She said neither of us told anyone close to us because they could not reveal the experience and risk damaging an important relationship with someone who might never look at them the same way again. So what do you guys think? Is this a rake or an entirely new species of cryptid that I've never heard before? Maybe you have. Are we talking alien because of the whole mind stuff? I don't know. Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you have your own cryptid story, please share it. If you're interested in my creepy storytime merch, check out the LINK in my bio. And if you're new here, you gotta follow for more creepy story time.
Trigger warning, if you don't like scary stories, you don't like paranormal, you want a good sleep at night, go ahead and scroll because I'm about to read another scary story submission that was sent to me via email. Let's get into it. First off, the subject had me immediately. It says potential possession, and this was written and sent in by a Jacinta. Let's go ahead. Hey Casey, I wanted to share an experience with you that honestly traumatized me for life, but at the same time made me curious. Last year, on the 28th of February, I was sent to a place of safety, which was originally a prison. Can't really explain what happened in the prison because it's too disturbing for TikTok, but let's just say it has a very dark history. Anyway, the day I stepped into the so-called girls section, I immediately felt a really bad energy, especially late at night. The other girls would tell me stories about how the place was haunted, but one story stood out to me the most. One girl, let's call her Shannon, please keep her name in mind, was singing in the shower one night around 11 o'clock when someone started singing with her. The only thing was, everyone else was asleep, including the caretakers. One day, a few of the girls and I were bored, so we decided to play Charlie Charlie. At first, nothing unusual happened. I was wearing my cross necklace at the time, and Shannon told me to take it off because she said the game wouldn't work otherwise. Shannon also claimed to know what she called the 7 demons of hell, and repeatedly chanted their names before he started playing again. After that, she said a few words in Latin. She told us that she had heard them somewhere before but couldn't remember what they meant. Eventually, we started the game again. After chanting Charlie, Charlie a few times, the pencils suddenly fell in perfect parallel to one another. I didn't know what that meant, but Shannon insisted it was a bad sign. First, we didn't think much of it. A few minutes later though, Shannon started laughing hysterically. Then suddenly she stopped. She stared into the small room, which is actually a built-in closet with a door that every dorm had. It was known as the darkest and creepiest part of the room. She stood there staring for what felt like 5 full minutes. Then without warning, she started screaming and crying. She became violent, and her cries became so deep, it sounded almost inhuman. We all panicked and ran out of the dorm, only after realizing afterwards that we had never actually finished the game. After a while, Shannon calmed down. But she couldn't walk. Apparently while she was in that state, she twisted her leg. Later that night, we decided to finish the game because we were terrified that something else might happen if we didn't. We asked Charlie to leave, then the dorm door suddenly slammed shut. The strange thing was that the door couldn't be opened from the inside. Somebody had to push it open from the outside. Because of that, we almost never closed it. We were all terrified, but we managed to properly end the game. To this day, I still can't believe I experienced something like that. Whether there was another explanation or not, it scared me enough that I never wanted to play any horror games or paranormal games ever again. First of all, Jacinta, thank you so much for sending in your story and trusting me to share it. I don't know if it's because I'm old, but I've never heard of this game, Charlie Charlie. I've never heard of it. It kind of sounds kind of like a Bloody Mary kind of thing, but I've never heard of it. So for the people watching, have you ever heard of and or played this game before? Because I'm very ignorant on it. I'm actually going to have to look it up. Sounds terrifying. You want to send in your scary story for a chance for me to read it on my page, just go ahead and send it to the email above. If you're new here and you want more paranormal story action, make sure to give me a follow. As always, thank you for watching. Love you, bye.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal encounters, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. At the time all of this happened, my family was living in a rental home while our new house was being built. The rental wasn't an old house, and nothing about it looked creepy at all. And during the day, it felt completely normal and fine. I will admit, though, that being there alone did feel weird and different. One afternoon, my mom took my younger brother and sister to the dentist, which left me home by myself. And for whatever reason, I'd barely slept for the 2 days prior to this, so while I was home alone, I ended up falling asleep in my room. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when I found myself waking up to the sound of the front door opening and someone calling my name. Immediately, I assumed it was my mom and that they had come home early. So, still half asleep, I got out of bed and walked into the hallway. But when I got there, I found the house completely silent and empty. No voices, no footsteps, no sounds of keys being set down or shoes being taken off. Nothing and no one. I stood there confused for a moment before eventually convincing myself that I had imagined it. I'd been exhausted, barely sleeping, so maybe I was still half asleep and I dreamed the whole thing. Trying to shake it off, I went back into my room and started working on some school assignments that I needed to get done. As I was just getting into the rhythm of things, that's when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 loud knocks echoed, coming from the front door. They were so forceful and so loud that the sound vibrated through the house, and I could see my door physically shaking. I jumped off of my bed and hurried to the door, expecting to find a neighbor or my mom, but when I got to the door and opened it, there wasn't a single person outside. No one was standing on the other side of the door, and even the street beyond my front yard was empty. Not even a car. I felt scared and uneasy, but I tried to ignore it. I told myself to calm down. Something had to explain what was happening here, but either way, I closed the door softly and locked it. As I walked back toward my bedroom, I had to pass through a long hallway that looked directly into the kitchen. I chanced a glance toward it and froze. Standing in the kitchen, perfectly still, was a woman. She was dressed entirely in white. Her long black hair hung over her face, hiding any feature that would help me place her. She wasn't moving at all. She didn't even look like she was breathing. She was just standing there. For what felt like an eternity, neither of us moved, even though every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. Eventually, though, I got hold of my thoughts and my body, and I bolted down the hallway and slammed my bedroom door shut. I wanted to lock it, but in that moment, I remembered that in the rental home, none of the room doors locked. To make it worse, they never fully closed. They always stayed slightly cracked open. I was only 10 years old, but I pushed against that door with everything that I had, trying to keep it shut. As I was focused, I heard them. Footsteps, slow and heavy, placed one right after the other, each step echoing through the hallway. The hallway that led to my room, that led to me. They were getting closer, ever so closer, and with each step, I heard my breathing get harder and felt my heart kick up speed. I listened intently as they continued, until they stopped, right outside my bedroom door. At this point, I was crying so hard that I could barely breathe. I grabbed my phone out of my pocket and tried calling my mom, but of course, no answer. Frantically, I called again, and nothing. In that moment, I remember thinking, This is it. This is how I die. I didn't know what else to do. I was out of options, so I did the only thing that came to mind. I started praying. Reciting verses from the Quran over and over, I kept repeating the name of Allah louder each time through my tears. And as I continued praying, something changed. The overwhelming fear that I was experiencing slowly faded. The room suddenly felt warm, but comforting, not like suffocating. It felt peaceful. I felt like whatever was outside my door couldn't come any closer. Still, though, I stayed there for what felt like hours, too terrified to move, and eventually I heard the front door open again. This time, it actually was my mom, and I ran to her crying and told her everything that had happened. After I finished, she quietly responded to me. She told me that she had heard that years earlier, a woman in her 30s had taken her own life in that home after enduring years of abuse and overwhelming family problems. My mom believed the woman that I had seen might have been her. The very next day, we asked a sheikh to come bless the house. Things became quieter after that, but never actually stopped. Almost every night, I would still hear footsteps walking down that same hallway. Every single time, they would stop right outside my bedroom. We were able to move out 3 years later when our new house was finally finished, and you'd think that would be the end of it. But even now, whenever I go downstairs late at night to get a glass of water, I'll catch myself looking toward a doorway or a hallway, and every once in a while, for just a split second, I think I see a woman standing there, dressed in white, her long black hair covering her face.
This story tonight is easily the scariest one I've told yet, and that's because it happened to me tonight. I had a whole story planned for tonight, but I have to change gears and tell you about what just happened to me. You know the drill. Grab a drink, grab a cozy blanket, and settle in while I tell you a scary story in my garden after dark. Welcome to Ghosts in the Garden. For those who don't know, my husband and I live in rural Michigan. We're not super rural, but we're still in a town of less than 10,000 people. Tonight we were both having a craving for Panda Express, and so I decided to drive a couple towns over and get that for us. The drive there was uneventful. I drive on back roads that are one way in each direction, 55 miles an hour, and usually surrounded by forest and farmland. I got our food, I got back in the car, and I started my trek home. The drive was only about 15 to 20 minutes depending on how fast I went, so it's not a big deal. I don't drive a large car, but I don't drive a small car either. It's a mid-sized SUV, brand new. The only new car I've ever owned in my life. I was driving as I usually do. My windows up, music blaring, singing along. And as I was going through a particularly dark stretch of forest, I got this uneasy feeling. As soon as I felt it, I heard something slam the side of my car. It was loud enough that I immediately paused my music and thought that I'd hit something. But I realized I'd seen nothing in the road, and nothing hit the front of my car. It was a very loud, audible bang on the side of my car next to the driver's side door. It sounded as if someone had come up and taken both hands and slammed them on the side of the car. At first, I tried to rationalize it and figured that something that was in the back of my car had just fallen. I have a couple cases of canning jars in the back as canning season is quickly approaching. But as quick as that thought showed up in my mind, I realized canning jars falling would have sounded like falling glass, not like someone hitting the outside of my car. I was only about 10 minutes from home, and so I sped up a bit and kept driving. I couldn't shake the eerie feeling the whole drive home, but nothing else notable happened other than almost hitting a deer a couple minutes from my door. As I pulled onto my street, I felt relieved. I pulled into the driveway, turned the car off, and quietly exited the car as to not wake up our son, and started walking up to the front of the house. At this point, it was very dark outside, almost 10:30 p.m. We have street lights on our street, but they are not very bright, and the only light as I walked up was our porch light. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard my husband call for me from out in the driveway. I heard him just say, "Hey babe," as he always does when he greets me. I turned to answer him, looking into the driveway, but I didn't see anyone there. At that point, I was a bit creeped out because I realized while the voice sounded identical to his, it had a very flat tone. It didn't have the usual human inflection, and it sounded almost robotic. At that point, I opened the front door and quickly went inside, shutting it behind me. And as I turned around, I see my husband walk out of the kitchen, saying, "Hey babe," as he always does when I get home. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and I told him that I thought he was outside. He said he'd been inside all along, washing dishes in the sink. The way our house is laid out, the only way he could have gotten from the driveway back to the kitchen would be going through the garage, and I would have heard the garage door open. Thoroughly unnerved, we sat down and ate dinner while I told him about the sound on my car. He couldn't give me an explanation to what it could have been. And then, of course, he jokingly asked me if I was going to tell you guys this story. I told him yes, and he laughed and said, "Good luck out in the garden." If any of you have encountered something like this, I would absolutely love to hear what you have to say. Do you think the sound on the side of my car and that voice were related? I don't know if you can feel how nervous I am sitting out here right now in the dark alone, but I am going to head back inside now, and please let me know in the comments what you think that was. If you have your own story, please send it over to me. I would love to read it, and I will join you next time out in my garden after dark for another scary story. Bye.
Tonight's spooky story comes from a school custodian who'd heard rumors about their haunted auditorium in the past. He'd even experienced some strange things himself, but one late night, the auditorium finally showed him where those rumors really came from. So grab a blanket, maybe a snack, and get settled in for tonight's Midnight Confessions, Stories from the Dark. I worked as a custodian at the same high school for almost 17 years. The building was old enough that every hallway seemed to have its own ghost story. From time to time, we'd hear footsteps when no one was there, and items were moved when no one touched them. Normal stuff for a haunted place. But the auditorium was where the real hauntings occurred. Stories of people hearing applause from the empty auditorium had circulated for decades. It usually happened late at night, long after rehearsals had ended and everyone had gone home. A custodian would be sweeping the lobby or checking the exterior doors, and suddenly, a burst of applause would come from inside the auditorium. It would last several seconds and then just stop before anyone opened the doors. During my first few years at the school, I heard the applause 4 or 5 times. I experienced other strange things in there too. Once, I left my room leaning against the stage while I emptied the trash cans in the lobby. When I returned, it was lying in the center aisle beside a small, neat pile of dust. Another time, I heard several seats lower behind me while I was cleaning the stage. When I turned around, 3 seats in the back row were folded down. There were nights when the curtain opened several inches after I had closed it, and mornings when I found programs scattered across the stage, even though the auditorium door had been locked. The incidents were unsettling, but I grew accustomed to them after a while. Whenever the ghosts moved something, I would politely ask them to put it back when they were done. Sometimes whatever had moved would be back where it belonged the next morning. I had never actually seen a ghost until one summer just before the first day of school. The school had been mostly empty throughout the summer, and we were planning for back-to-school orientation. The auditorium would be used for the opening presentation, so everything needed to be cleaned before the parents and students arrived. I had also missed several days of work because of medical appointments, which left me behind schedule. For months, I had been dealing with pain beneath my ribs and constant fatigue that I kept blaming on stress. My doctor ordered scans after blood work showed several abnormalities. The scans led to a biopsy, but I was still waiting for the final results. The night of the encounter, I stayed later than usual to finish the auditorium. The other custodians had already left. Later that night, I noticed my broom was missing. I had left it against the wall near the stage door, but it was not there when I went back for it. Eventually, I found it leaning in a seat in the center of the front row. The seat was folded upright, and the broom had been positioned carefully beside it, as though someone had placed it there on purpose. I carried the broom back to the stage and finished sweeping. By the time I had finished, it was almost midnight. I turned off the stage lights, checked the exit doors, and stepped into the lobby. As soon as I closed the auditorium doors, the applause started. I opened one of the doors. The auditorium was dark, but I could see the faint outlines of the seats beneath the red exit signs. The applause stopped the moment I entered. I switched on the aisle lights. Every seat was empty. Just as I was going to step out and close the door, the stage curtain moved. The 2 halves slowly separated. I had already turned off every light on stage, but a pale spotlight appeared at the center of the floor. My broom stood upright inside of it. There was no stand supporting it. It rested perfectly straight on the bristles, as though someone invisible were holding the handle. Then the seats began to lower, and shapes appeared in them. I realized people were sitting in the seats. They wore clothing from different periods. I saw women in long skirts and fitted hats, Men in wide ties and old-fashioned jackets. Teenagers in sweaters and uniforms that had not been worn at the school for decades. Some looked as though they had come from a formal performance. Others wore ordinary work clothes, school clothes, or heavy winter coats. Their bodies were clear, but their faces were not. Every face looked blurred, like a picture was taken while someone was moving. I could see the shapes of heads and the dark impressions of eyes, but no distinct features. All of them were looking at the stage. The broom tipped forward. It struck the wooden floor with a sharp crack. Suddenly, every head turned toward me. The auditorium remained completely silent, but I felt the weight of hundreds of people staring at me from the dark. Then the audience looked away from me and turned toward the front row. One seat was still folded upright. It was the same seat where I found my broom earlier. Every other seat in the auditorium was occupied. The spotlight moved from the broom to the vacant chair. The seat slowly lowered by itself. As soon as it reached the bottom, the audience began applauding. I backed away, ran out the door, and left without finishing the rest of my work. 2 weeks later, my oncologist called me into his office. The biopsy confirmed cancer. It had already spread to several organs, and surgery was no longer considered curative. Treatment might slow it down, but the doctor was honest with me about the prognosis. I did not have as much time as I had assumed. While he explained the treatment options, all I could think about was the empty seat. I returned to work on an adjusted schedule that allowed me to continue treatment. Several months passed before I saw the audience again. I had stayed late after a school play, helping clean programs and cups from aisles. When I turned to leave, I heard quiet applause behind me. The seats were occupied. The figures sat in the darkness with their blurred faces turned toward the stage. The front row seat remained empty. This time, they did not frighten me as much. They simply sat there watching me work. I saw them several more times over the following year. They appeared only when I was alone, and usually after the auditorium had been used for a performance or school event. Sometimes they applauded, and sometimes they remained silent. The same seat was always waiting in the front row. Eventually, the treatments and fatigue made it too difficult to continue working full-time. I retired almost exactly 1 year after my diagnosis. I'm still alive as I tell this story, although my doctors have made it clear that I probably do not have much time left. I've thought about the auditorium a lot. I used to think the hauntings were just leftover memories or energy that had nowhere to go. Now, I think they're more than that. For 17 years, I heard them without ever seeing them. Then, 2 weeks before I learned I was dying, they finally allowed me to see the audience and the one place left open among them. As scary as dying may seem, at least I know that, when the time comes, they have saved me a seat. That story is both terrifying and strangely comforting. Let me know what you think in the comments, and as always, thanks for spending the night with me. If you love spooky stories, be sure to follow for more Midnight Confessions.
Imagine waking up one night and realizing every sound on Earth has disappeared. No wind, no insects, no traffic, not even your own breathing. According to a classified emergency report from 2007, that's exactly what happened. And the people who tried to break the silence were never seen again. Welcome to the Midnight Sesh. We have had some cat fore. Now let's get into the story. The event became known as the Silence Storm. Though no one knows why, there was no lightning, no heavy rain, no strong winds. In fact, the weather was perfectly clear. At exactly 2:17 a.m., thousands of people across 3 neighboring countries reported the same thing. The world simply went silent. People later claimed they screamed as loud as they could, but nothing came out. Emergency dispatch centers were flooded with calls. Operators could see people speaking, they could hear nothing. Then the calls began disconnecting. One dispatcher later wrote that the silence wasn't peaceful. It felt heavy, like something was listening. About 3 minutes into the event, security cameras began capturing something strange. People all over town started looking in the exact same direction. They would stop walking, turn their heads towards empty streets, and simply stare. Some investigators believed they were hearing something no recording equipment could detect. Others refused to speculate. Then came the first disappearance. A security guard reviewing cameras at a grocery store watched a customer suddenly wave at someone standing in an empty aisle. She smiled, opened her mouth as if greeting an old friend, then stepped around the corner. She never came back. The aisle was empty. Police searched every inch of the building. There was nowhere she could have gone. As the silence continued, more people vanished. Then, exactly 6 minutes after it began, sound returned, all at once. The sudden noise was so overwhelming that many survivors described it as physically painful. By sunrise, 37 people were officially missing. No evidence, no bodies. Nothing. The government blamed confusion caused by a rare atmospheric event. Every year, on the anniversary of the silent storm, people leave their windows open at 2:17 a.m. Not to listen, but because older residents believe that if the silence ever returns, the worst thing you could do is make it think you're hiding. Maybe move out of the town? That's what I would do. I feel like shit always happens in the small towns. Don't live in a small town, you know? Go explore the world. What the fuck do I know? Let me know your thoughts down below. Go ahead and like, follow, comment, and share. I love you as always. Bye.
Why is it so much easier to manifest little specific things that we don't really care about or don't put much importance on? I talked about this in my last video and it got a lot of responses on TikTok that makes me think this is just kind of a universal phenomenon where it's like you think of some very random, very specific thing, but you don't really care about it and it comes through. I'm seeing these comments like, I asked to see a zebra and about 2 hours later I went to McDonald's and bought a family meal deal and inside the Happy Meal was a zebra. Then I tested it on the drive home. I said, okay, a butterfly. I pulled out of the van and in front of me had a butterfly design on the side. But the thing I've been really trying to manifest for 8 months still hasn't come through. I was thinking about farmers' almanacs this morning and this gave me chills because I've been trying since I saw this video. They saw farmers' almanacs, which I don't even know what the heck that is. I was sitting at my desk one time thinking I'd really like some bread pudding, and within 15 minutes, someone showed up at my desk and offered me bread pudding. So what is this phenomenon of just a light intention, a soft desire? There's no insistence, there's no need. We don't have a fan over our stove, so every time my husband cooks steak, the house gets smoky, and I thought it would actually be really nice to have a grill outside, not really caring, because we don't have any intention of buying one. His grandma bought us one just on a whim. I was waiting to board a flight, and I thought I'd really like to sit next to a couple that wants to take my middle seat, and boom, that's exactly what happened. I manifested a purple frog. I knew it would be nearly impossible to find a purple frog, so I didn't care. 2 days ago, and there's the purple frog. That reminds me of a time I set the intention to see a yellow bird. I just thought about it for a moment. I thought yellow bird, I let it go. And then hours later, I was walking through the grocery store and I saw some hot sauce on the shelf called yellow bird. In my original post, I was talking about how Abraham Hicks would say it's just as easy to create a castle as it is a button, meaning that to the universe, the castle and the button are of equal value, but we have to be able to look at the castles in our life of being no bigger or more different than the buttons. But somebody left a comment that I also agree with where they say it's that you just don't feel worthy of the big thing. That's true too, I think, and I don't have all the answers, but I've been exploring this stuff for a while, and I think that any form of resistance, whether it be that on a subconscious level you don't think you deserve it, or even if it's a fear of getting what you want because you know that your whole life is going to change, and change can be scary, right? So maybe we'll do things to keep that away from us really receiving it. To the universe, the castle and the button thing is real. I think like from our pure awareness, it's just infinite things that we can select. So I think it's really just about what we allow in by not resisting. I think too why these small things can feel easier is because we've made up a lot less rules around how unobtainable they are, or the specific steps we think we need to take in order to attract them. While on the other hand, we might often have much more rigid or limiting beliefs around our ability to achieve our highest goals. The law of detachment and practicing gratitude and not having the state of lack. You're detached from the thing because it's not that big of a deal. You're still grateful for what you currently have because the thing is not making or breaking you, and you're not feeling from a place of lack. We can absolutely put this on the big things in life. That resonates with me too. I think that we just put a big importance on something, it gets on a pedestal, it no longer feels natural, and the subconscious mind keeps it kicked out of our experience, right? Last week, I set the intention to see one of those old paper fortune tellers. I haven't seen those in years, and a few nights later, I saw it on a TV show on a desk in the background. So I find this to be such an interesting phenomenon, and I think at the end of the day, all things are selectable, but we do want to do our best to be chill and to be okay with where we are right now and to understand that these things do not make or break us. And if we can look at the castles in our life and not see them as big giant castles, but just a simple preference that we prefer because all things are choosable, I think that's what eases out our resistance and lets it come in a little bit easier.
A series of spooky stories, anonymous submission. I've been listening to your TikToks for a while and figured out of all the spooky cryptid encounters me and my family had encountered, it was time for me to share one. I'm going to try and remain as anonymous as possible because I've worked very hard to mask my energy from the paranormal and I do not want this to come back to me. This is technically my dad's story, but I'll explain why I'm telling it and why it's so much scarier being my dad's story. My family has lived in northern Appalachia all of my life. Oh, you know it's about to be a good one. So cryptids and creatures were a normal fact of life for most. But not my family, and especially not my dad. My father is a devout Christian, firm in his beliefs, and also an animal expert. He's worked at his job for almost 20 years and deals with wild animals on a daily basis. Anything from porcupine to deer to black bears and coyotes. He has a gift with animals that seems almost uncanny, and he cares deeply for every animal that he comes in contact with. The only time I've seen him cry is when an animal in his care has died. The other thing you have to know about my dad is that working this job for so long has made him incredibly observant, quick on his feet, and most of all, realistic. He doesn't believe in all this woo-woo crap. His words, not mine. This is why I believe the story is much more terrifying coming from him. He told it to me casually, like a normal work story. He was driving his work vehicle home and saw a group of deer in his field to his right. He slowed down to observe and noticed immediately that one of them was bigger than the others. He goes on to say that it was way bigger than he would consider normal size difference from the other deer. He tells me that as he drove away, he watched the bigger deer stand on its hind legs and walk like a human. I'm sorry? His explanation? It must have been a bear with mange, a condition caused by parasites that make animals itch and lose their fur. And he was seeing things, but he could have swore that it had antlers. He laughed it off, but I didn't. I'm not laughing either, because I'm imagining exactly what it is, and I don't like it. There are 3 reasons that story makes me so nervous. Bears do not hang out with deer like that, and often don't survive mange long enough to lose all of their fur, or at least enough for my dad to mistake it as a deer. 2, in Appalachia, there's a cryptid called the not deer. It's known for being bigger than regular deer and having forward-facing predator eyes, and is often observed on its hind legs. And 3, my dad has never, and I mean never, doubted himself the way that he did when he explained it as a bear. He's incredibly confident in his job and his abilities to observe and identify species of animals. Plus, I'm confident that if he saw a bear with that much mange, he would have stopped to help it. I'm convinced that he saw something that didn't align with the truth he keeps in his head and makes him rewrite the story to save him the fear and the belief crisis. I hope this one is spooky enough for you. If not, I have more than one encounter that I'm willing to share while I'm safe on respected land, including several of my own not deer stories. Thanks for reading. Signed, Animal Expert in Appalachia. There is truly nothing that I love more than a spooky Appalachia story. And I firmly believe that the reason that your dad doubts it is exactly why you say it. He can't make it make sense in his mind because he doesn't believe in the woo-woo crap, as he calls it. But if you know that a bear wouldn't hang around with deer like that, he has to know that they wouldn't hang around with deer like that. But then again, sometimes coping means that you are going to try any and everything that you can to make sense of what you're seeing or what you think you see. What do you guys think? Do you think that he really thought that it was a bear with mange? Or was he seeing the not deer? Rated on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. See y'all at the next episode.
I'm pretty sure this ghost is haunting my baby, and I think I just got proof of it on the baby cam. Lip gloss on so I can run this mouth. Now focus. Scary story time, Fright Night Files. This photo was sent to me. Apparently, this woman had been checking on her baby, and every time she does, she gets what she believes to be some kind of something. It kind of looks like a woman, kind of not. It's scarier than like a grandma ghost. I'm going to show you the image. I'm going to cover the baby's face because you guys don't need to see the baby. I've done these before, and a lot of people are like, why can't we see the baby? Because you can't. Okay, you can't. I'm not going to show you the baby. You don't need to see it. We're looking at what is trying to kiss the baby. So here's the image, and the image is unsettling. I don't know what kind of toy it would be to give the appearance of like a person. It does look like it's leaning in to maybe kiss the baby goodnight. I don't know. I can see why the mom would be like, what the hell, when she checked the monitor. But I want to know what you think. And this isn't the only one. I want to show you one more. The one that I just showed you, I can see why people would be like, oh, that's maybe like a toy box or a toy or something. But what is this? What is this? You can see both legs. The face is unsettling. It clearly looks like something standing up. And you know, it wouldn't have been like an actual person because you can see the back of the baby's head underneath the right thigh of whatever this is. This one is the one that had me like, oh no. I don't know what I would do if I saw something like this. Like when my kids were small, we didn't really use monitor baby things like this. And I'm glad we didn't, honestly, because all of these that I see are terrifying. I get so many of these of ghostly things caught on baby cameras, and none of them are ever good. They're never good. So let me know what you think about these two.
What happens when the scariest film on Netflix that only 13% of viewers can actually finish is based on a true story? The only right answer is you obviously finish the movie no matter how scary it is, and then you look into the real case. I'm talking about the 2017 Spanish horror movie Veronica, which is labeled the scariest movie on Netflix. So I was one of the 13% that actually finished the movie, but let me just say it was incredibly scary. Like nightmare fuel, make you scared to fall asleep type scary. But I recently found out that this story wasn't just made up. It was based on the real case of Estefania Gutierrez Lazaro. She mysteriously died in 1991 after a seance in which she played with a Ouija board. She lived for only 6 months after playing with the Ouija board, and what she experienced in that time frame is bone chilling. Some people believe her, some are still skeptical. So let's talk about it and you can decide for yourself. The movie Veronica follows a teenager named Veronica and her 2 friends, and it takes place in 1991 Madrid. In the film, Veronica's dad has died and one of her friend's boyfriends has also passed away. So what do? All 3 of them play with a Ouija board at school. You know, the only logical answer. But after this, Veronica ends up possessed by a demonic entity that is hell-bent on torturing her and those closest to her. This movie was a slow burn, but it genuinely freaked me out. The director, Paco Plaza, got his inspiration from the real possession of Estefania Gutierrez Lazaro. And surprisingly, the movie is pretty similar to what she actually experienced. And let me just start off by saying, even if you don't believe in stuff like this is the only case in Spain where a police officer actually investigated. And then he sat down and wrote in his police report that he 100% witnessed paranormal phenomena. So do with that information as you will. Anyways, this is Estefania. She was only 18 years old when she suddenly and very mysteriously died in 1991. She lived in the Vallecas neighborhood of Spain, and by all accounts, her life was pretty normal. Estefania had lots of friends and 5 siblings, so she was always surrounded by lots of people. In 1990, her estranged grandfather was on his deathbed. Now, her grandpa hated his family, but he whispered his last words ever to Estefania, and some people think this is where her haunting began. He told her, quote, "If I cannot harm you in this life, I will do it in the next one." End quote. Estefania and her siblings really didn't want to go and see him, but her parents thought that it was the right thing to do. Fast forward a few months later. This is when one of Estefania's closest friend's boyfriends passed away suddenly in a motorcycle accident. It was very tragic and hard to process for everyone inside that friend group. But Estefania had an idea. She thought that if she got a Ouija board, maybe they could all have a seance and try to contact her friend's late boyfriend. So they did. But almost immediately, things went horribly wrong. They held the seance at their school, so it was Estefania and her 2 closest friends, and according to them, unsettling and unexplained things happened right off the bat. The glass pointer on the Ouija board began to spin around untouched on the board until it eventually shattered to pieces. They never got the chance to contact her friend's late boyfriend because, out of nowhere, the Ouija board started emitting this unnatural smoke, even though it wasn't on fire. Estefania was the only one who sat too close and accidentally inhaled some of this strange smoke, and after this, nothing would ever be the same. A nun at the school ended up catching them and broke the board, but it didn't take long for everyone to notice something strange about Estefania. She would start having violent convulsions where her whole body went rigid, and her eyes would either go completely black or completely white. During these episodes, she would foam at the mouth. She also began experiencing terrifying visions of dark figures roaming her bedroom and almost controlling her. She would randomly attack her family members or bark at them, and then she would black out and have no memory of what just took place. She said these dark shadows would torment her. She could no longer sleep at night, and if she did, she would wake up standing completely upright, scratching the walls. It got so bad that her fingers were bloody. Estefania declined very quickly over the next 6 months, both physically and mentally, and it really scared her family. They had no idea how to help her, so they started by having a doctor examine her. All of her symptoms could be connected to epilepsy, but multiple doctors examined her, and none of them found any underlying physical or cognitive condition. She was never even diagnosed with epilepsy. When doctors couldn't help her, the family turned to priests, but they couldn't help either. One of the very last things that she ever said was that the demons were begging her to come with them. And sadly, just 6 months after the seance and playing with the Ouija board, Estefania mysteriously died. Her autopsy report only stated cardiac arrest as her cause of death. And outside of that, the medical report said, quote, sudden and suspicious death, end quote. You'd think that would be the end of the story, but no. It doesn't end there. For over a year after Estefania died, her family would continue to be haunted. The house itself became a hotspot for paranormal activity, and somehow it progressed even worse. The family would constantly hear someone scream and laugh in the home, and on several occasions, they would open Estefania's bedroom door, only to find it destroyed. All of her belongings were strewn all over the place. All of the doors and windows in the house would open and slam shut on their own, and deep scratches would mysteriously appear all over the walls. Every single family member saw a black figure crawling around their house in an unnatural way. Furniture was destroyed, appliances would go on and off, and I think one of the scariest things they experienced was a photo of Estefania mysteriously falling off the wall. When they went to pick it up, they found that the picture itself had been burned, while the picture frame was completely intact and undamaged. Every crucifix they had in the house would flip upside down without anyone touching it. The events eventually got so bad that the family actually called the police because they didn't know what else to do. 4 officers came out to the home, and to their surprise, they found the entire family huddled together outside. This made the hair on the back of their necks stand up because it was in the dead of night and it was freezing outside, and one of them even had a newborn with them. So for them to be standing outside like that, they must have been really scared. When the officers went inside, they said they immediately felt like something was seriously wrong. They heard loud banging in the house, even though they were the only ones inside. And while they were looking at a wardrobe, the doors started violently opening and closing right in front of them when no one was touching it. The officers also found this unexplained brown residue on a nightstand that appeared right before their eyes, which some have later said was ectoplasm. Before long, 2 of the officers went back outside and refused to come back in, leaving only 2 of them to continue investigating. The remaining officers noticed cold spots all over the house and occasionally the smell of rotten meat. After their investigation, the police officers left, unable to help this family. But the craziest part is that when the lead officer went back to the station to file his incident report, he actually wrote that he 100% witnessed paranormal phenomena. I think that's the most insane thing about this case. This possession is the only police report in Spain that recorded paranormal events. So whether or not you believe in the paranormal, I just wanted to point this out because I think it's so rare to have actual police officers back people up in cases like this. Eventually, the family couldn't take living here any longer, and they eventually sold their house. What's odd though is that the new owners never heard or experienced anything paranormal after the family left. So this leads me to question, was it really the house that was haunted, or was it the family? I know a lot of people say that her death was due to an undiagnosed medical condition, which if I'm being honest, I can see that being true. But it is super weird to me that all of this only started happening after she played with the Ouija board. I don't know. What do you guys think? Was she really possessed, or was something else at play? Nonetheless, it inspired this movie. Have you guys seen it? Because it scared the crap out of me the first time I watched it. I think it scared me because it did a good job instilling me with dread and anxiety. But I'm also just a chicken when it comes to possession movies. It scored 86% on Rotten Tomatoes though, which is pretty good. I think any film that says based on a true story at the beginning can be terrifying, but it hits different when you know that it actually was.